Linda sat quietly at the corner of the family room, the soft hum of the air conditioner blending with the occasional clink of glasses as the party continued in full swing. The grand mansion felt cold, despite the extravagant decorations, the laughter, and the clinking of champagne glasses. To anyone else, it might have looked like the picture-perfect gathering, a celebration of wealth and status. But for Linda, it was suffocating, and the disconnection between her and her husband Larry had never felt more palpable. She had always known something wasn't quite right. When they first met, Larry was charming, attentive, and everything she thought she wanted in a man. His family's wealth had been a bonus, a world of luxury and privilege that she never thought she'd belong to. But that world had begun to feel like a gilded cage. The more she got to know Larry, the more she realized he was a man who was more interested in his own comforts than in anyone else's happiness, especially hers. As time passed, Linda's place in his life became clearer. She was more of a decoration, a trophy wife to be shown off at his family's events, rather than a partner in a marriage. Tonight, as she sat in the corner of the room, Linda couldn't help but observe Larry's behavior once again. He was laughing too loudly at something his brother had said, his attention fixed entirely on the conversation. It was as if Linda didn't exist, as if her presence had been erased from the room altogether. Her heart ached with the familiar sting of neglect, but it wasn't just the emotional distance between them that bothered her now. Something more unsettling had crept into her thoughts, something she had been trying to ignore for weeks. Linda's eyes drifted to the family portraits hanging on the wall, photos of Larry and his family in various opulent settings. But all she could focus on now was the thought that had been growing in her mind. What if this marriage wasn't just unfulfilling? What if it was toxic? It wasn't a thought she liked to entertain. But tonight, with the air thick with champagne and laughter that felt hollow, it seemed to seep into her every cell. Larry's family had always been kind to her, but she couldn't ignore the underlying tension that simmered between her and them. They were polite, but their politeness often felt insincere. She had always been an outsider, a reminder of the different world Larry had once been eager to escape. As the evening wore on, Linda found herself wandering through the corridors of the mansion, seeking a moment of peace away from the chaos. She ended up in the library, a room that had always felt like a sanctuary for her. The books, the quiet, the smell of aged paper, everything about it calmed her. But tonight, even here, she couldn't escape the discomfort that gnawed at her. It was then that she noticed the envelope lying on the desk. It was an envelope she didn't recognize. It had no return address, just her name written in elegant, flowing script. Curiosity mixed with unease as she picked it up, torn between opening it and leaving it untouched. The clock on the wall ticked away the seconds, but Linda couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change. Without thinking, she tore open the envelope. Inside, there was a single sheet of paper folded neatly in half. Her heart raced as she unfolded it, her eyes scanning the words written in bold, sharp ink. Linda, you need to know the truth about Larry. He's been lying to you. You think you're his wife, but you're just another piece of property in a game he's been playing for years. His family knows exactly who you are and what you mean to him. They'll never accept you, never really love you. Linda's breath caught in her throat. The words on the page felt like a slap, cold and unforgiving. Lying? Property? She had always known something was off, but this was worse than she could have imagined. The idea that Larry had been hiding something from her, that his family saw her as less than... How had she missed all of this? She reread the note, but this time, she couldn't focus on the words. The truth was sinking in, breaking through the veil of denial she had lived under for so long. The weight of it pressed down on her chest, and she felt the familiar tightness in her throat, as if she were choking on her own thoughts. For the first time in years, Linda felt a sharp, bitter anger toward Larry. How could he do this? How could he live a lie with her? And worse, make her believe in something that wasn't real? As she stood there, paralyzed by the weight of the revelation, Larry's voice echoed down the hallway, breaking her trance. She quickly stuffed the note back into the envelope and placed it in her purse, her hands trembling. She couldn't confront him now, not here, not in the midst of the party. But she knew she couldn't let this go. Not anymore. The days that followed were a blur. Linda tried to go about her life, pretending that nothing had changed, but everything had changed. Larry's indifference grew more apparent with each passing day, and Linda's resentment festered. She spent more time alone in the house, finding solace in the quiet spaces where she could think. It was during these moments of solitude that the full weight of the note hit her. She began to question everything about her marriage. Had Larry ever really loved her? It wasn't until a week later, when Linda's suspicions were finally confirmed, that she could no longer ignore the truth. She overheard a conversation between Larry and his mother in the kitchen. They spoke in hushed tones, but Linda could still hear their words clearly. "You know how it is, Mom," Larry was saying. "Linda's just a phase. I never expected it to go this far, but we've got everything lined up. The prenup will keep things clean when the time comes." Linda's blood ran cold. The prenup? She had signed it without a second thought when they married, thinking it was just a formality, something that rich families did. But now it felt like a trap she had willingly walked into, blind to the manipulation behind it. The pieces began to fall into place. The years of subtle neglect, the way Larry had always treated her like an afterthought, the way his family had never really embraced her, all of it made sense now. She had been nothing more than a pawn in a game of wealth and status. The anger inside Linda bubbled up, hot and uncontrollable. She had been so naive, so willing to believe in a man who never cared about her. But now, that naivety was gone. She was done being the victim, done being the pawn in someone else's game. That night, Linda couldn't sleep. She tossed and turned, replaying the events of the day in her mind. And then, as the first light of dawn crept through the window, she made her decision. It wasn't a decision made lightly, but it was a decision that had been a long time coming. The next morning, when Larry returned from his morning run, Linda was waiting for him in the living room, a sense of resolve in her chest. She had packed her things, everything she needed to start over. She wasn't going to let Larry or his family control her life any longer. "Larry," she said, her voice steady, "I can't do this anymore. I'm leaving you." Larry looked at her, stunned. He opened his mouth to say something, but Linda held up her hand. "I don't need to hear it. I know everything." For the first time, Larry seemed truly speechless. But Linda didn't wait for him to respond. She turned on her heel and walked out the door, leaving behind a life she had once hoped to build. As Linda drove away from the mansion, her heart felt light for the first time in years. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing for sure. She was done living a lie. The road ahead was uncertain, but at least it was hers to walk.